Hello and welcome to Rotted Reviews, and before I begin with today's review, I want to give a little bit of a shout out. I have 2 new patrons signed up for my one tier on Patreon, which is a $1 a month kind of tip jar. Thank you so much to Ben Grimm and to Mission Air. So, today I have a little bit of a treat. This was a movie that was recommended to me by a good friend of mine, Nick Schlegel, and he said, you need to check this movie out. It's called Lobos De Arga, and it was made in 2011, and it is absolutely bonkers. And you know what, Nick? Thank you. Thank you so much, because this was an absolutely wonderful watch that it really needs to be seen by more people. This is not so much, well, it is a review. I'm going to be reviewing this, scoring it, all that, but it's also a plea. It's a plea to services like Shudder that are willing to take chances on streaming international releases and to say, please add this one to your library. I think that the world will thank you for it. So this movie opens with our main character of Tomas, who is an aspiring writer. He's already written one book with, let's just say, mild success.
No sé, porque debo de ser el único famoso que ha aparecido alguna vez por allí.
Tomás, no seas cretino. No eres famoso.
Bueno, tú ya me entiendes, que para ellos un escritor es famoso.
Solo escribiste una novela y no la leyó nadie.
Joder, abuela, y eso que soy tu único nieto.
And he is looking to write his second, and he wants some quiet solitude. So where does he go? Well, he gets out of Madrid and he goes to his old childhood village and estate of Galicia. But what he's seeking more than anything else is not just quiet solitude, but also inspiration. He wants to get back to his roots. He wants to rekindle some childhood connections. He wants to get that old world village feel and see if maybe he can kindle something for his next book. Unfortunately, when he gets there, he finds that the village isn't quite what he remembered as he's thrust into the crosshairs of an old curse. So this was listed as a horror and a comedy, and typically when you have those two combined, it can be really, really hit or miss. Now, I've always said that when you try to combine comedy and horror, the one central element that you really need more than anything else is wit. It's cleverness. It's intelligence. Kind of all the same thing there, but regardless, I think that the movies that try to establish a comedy horror that rely on nothing but lowest common denominator fart jokes, it just doesn't appeal to me. It really doesn't work, and I don't think that they really stand the test of time. They do have their time and place, they're fun to riff on, but they're not the classics. They're not the ones that really hold up after decades. And this is a great movie in that it has that wit, it has that intelligence behind it. It knows what it is. It's very self-aware, not breaking the fourth wall, but still, it is self-aware, and it has a remarkable amount of very sharp dialogue between its characters, and that is one of the things that really makes this movie pop. Now, just going from a storytelling perspective, I think that this movie opened things up really well. It established a lot of information, and it delivered it to the audience in a way that it really didn't feel so obvious. Some level of exposition is always going to be necessary, but it never feels anything less than organic in this film, and that's something that a lot of movies get wrong, especially, your kind of low-budget horror movies where you'll have one character in an opening shot on their cell phone having a very one-sided conversation and explaining everything about the premise to the camera. They'll be on the phone and they'll be saying, it's like, hi, yes, I know I just broke up with my girlfriend and now I'm all alone and I'm going to go live in this big house. And they'll let about 3/4 of a second pass by and it's like, yes, I know that I'm
Everybody got that? Good.
This movie doesn't really go that direction. It does actually start with a phone call where he's talking with his abuela and discussing some of the events that are going on, but it breaks it up really well. That's only a very small fraction of the information that's actually being delivered. It also goes and has him with a little dog. It's the cutest little dog I've ever seen put to a horror film. It's just fantastic little companion there as this movie continues on. But, he's going through this old house and he's talking with his dog, and then he meets up with an old friend, and then he's talking with his friend, and each element of that has kind of a different aspect of catching up until by the end of the beginning, the audience is fully on board with everything about this character, what he's doing there, what he wants to get out of things, what his relationship with this town is, what his relationship with the past is. You're brought up to speed and it always feels organic. High marks on the storytelling there. And speaking of marks, I'm going to go ahead and throw up all the scores here. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And that storytelling obviously influences the plot score. And as far as the intent goes, a perfect 25 out of 25. That's something I really don't do too often. But I think that everything that this movie was trying to achieve, it did. It was funny. It was smart. It had some great gore, horror elements to it. It had some great werewolf-y moments to it. Those of us in America, we might be more used to the aesthetic of the werewolf in this kind of movie, or werewolves in this kind of movie, as being more Wolfman-esque than werewolf. But even so, it sold it particularly well. And the transition scenes, which is something that is always kind of glorious amongst us werewolf lovers, the transition scenes are not the best ever put to screen, but they're very good. They're very good and they're worth watching. I don't know if anything's actually ever going to beat American Werewolf in London, but this was pretty good, especially considering it used so many practical effects, especially for the transition scenes. You know, a lot of clever editing and cutting and so forth, but even so, it worked really well. But I think the thing that really sold the wit, the comedy, and the horror was the infighting and the dialogue amongst its central characters. Considering the bonkers nature of what was going on around them, the arguments over the little bits of minutia that they were going through really just highlighted the absurdity of their predicament, and the characters were intelligent. They were just enough intelligent to be aware of the situation, self-aware of their predicament, but not so intelligent that they held themselves back from participating in it. It was just a perfect balance, and some of the stuff that they went through was just hijinks of the highest caliber. It had me rolling. I had to pause. I had to leave my office. I had to go over and just talk about the scene that I just saw with my fiance, and just, you wouldn't believe what just happened here. It's fucking crazy. It's wonderful. And she was laughing just hearing my telling of it, and then I had to go back and continue watching it. But that happened a couple times during this movie. And as far as the horror elements go, I mean, I wouldn't say that there's anything really scary in this movie. There were a surprising few jump scares in here that actually worked pretty well, but nothing that was really designed to keep you on the edge of your seat. More so, it was just playful elements that contributed to the whimsy of the film itself. And so, I mean, all that tied together, yeah, perfect 25 out of 25. There were some flaws in this one, but I don't think that it detracted from the viewing experience, and it certainly didn't detract from the film itself. I think the acting was pretty top-notch. Like I said, a lot of this was sold with the infighting and the intelligence of the characters, and that really wouldn't have come across if the dialogue wasn't as sharp as it was. And that takes some pretty strong acting skill to have that kind of delivery between the characters.
Bueno, por no mencionar que está todo el pueblo buscándonos para matarnos, claro.
Tengo una idea.
¿Cuál?
A ver, la maldición dice que para que todo termine, la bestia tiene que comerse un niño varón, ¿o no lo dice? Que yo sepa, la maldición no dice en ningún lado que te tenga que comer entero. A lo mejor con un dedo ya va bien.
Thomas Marino, played by Gorko Ochoa, was just a fantastic main character in this. It was kind of surprising. I mean, I don't really follow Spanish cinema to the degree that I'd actually like to. I need to get more immersed in it. But these were names that were entirely unknown to me, but they were just perfectly placed for the role that they were in. And as far as the technical goes, it's 20 out of 25, which is a remarkably high score. But the reason it isn't any higher is because some of the effects were a little bit hammy. I say that the transitional werewolf thing was good. I would say even bordering on great, but it wasn't full-on great. It certainly wasn't epic. I don't want to start making apologies for things like, the budget and so on and so forth. But regardless, I think that did affect the point score. I mean, there were some effect elements of this that lent itself to the comedy, but not necessarily to the horror. And the designs of the werewolves themselves, again, it was more Wolfman than werewolf-esque. That's a petty thing, I know. I'm not really actually going to say that detracted from any points, but character design on a technical level, it is important when you're talking about a monster movie. I mean, that's a huge element of it, is the design of the monster. And although I don't think that this really took any points away, it wasn't exactly what I thought going into it. It still was a lot of fun, and the characters of the werewolves were spectacular in what they had to achieve, both on a horror level, a comedy level, and an action level. And this movie did have a fair amount of action to it as Tomas and his friends are trying to basically escape this village. And so a grand total of 87 out of 100 points. This had a remarkably high score for what I thought it might be going into it. I take my friend Nick's word, we don't always see eye to eye, but for the most part, we're fairly well aligned. But I still wasn't quite expecting it to be as bonkers as he said, or as good as he implied, and it was on both counts. This was a fun, fantastic thrill ride of a horror comedy that needs to be seen by more people. So again, I reiterate my plea to services like Shudder, please pick up Lobos De Arga. It is worth it. I would love for more people to see it, and that's about it. So that's my review of Lobos De Arga 2011. I really thank you for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you on my next review. If you like this, please click like and subscribe. If you want to support me further, my Patreon and my merchandise storefront links are below. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.